Now, before we learn to play, we have to have story time. And this story is about a man. Last name Haffol, first name Holol. And Holol was a happy, energetic professor of chemistry at a local college. And he loved his job. And he loved to teach. But after many years, he felt himself becoming bored with the curriculum, which filled him with guilt, for he still had a great love for his students and wanted them to succeed. And so he decided to try to come up with an antidote for boredom so that he could continue giving his usual enthusiastic lectures and not feel guilty anymore. And so for many months, Holol confined himself to his basement as he performed experiment after experiment until at last he developed a potion which upon drinking gave Holol an intense rush of motivation, that spark for teaching that he thought he had lost forever. But when he returned to class the next morning, he was not the same professor his students knew. His demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the happy, smiling, good-natured professor from before. And in his place was a darkly dressed, unshaven, disheveled man, but with an intense fire in his eyes. And one of the students, upon observing their teacher's new appearance, asked, "Is everything okay, Professor Haffol?" To which he replied, "Who? I do not answer to the name Holol Haffol, for I am Olaf, the mad chemist. Olaf O'Loll, to be exact. And we O'Lolls have one purpose in life, to cut through the nauseating optimism of that fool Haffol and others like him, and remind future chemists like yourselves that you'll never truly understand chemistry without the willingness to delve into the dark, dangerous parts. Life isn't all baking soda and vinegar volcanoes." And then another student asked, "What happened to Professor Haffol?" "Yeah, you're a bummer. We want Professor Haffol back," another one said. "Fine," replied Olaf. "If you want me gone, just say my first name." "What, Olaf?" asked the first student, and suddenly, standing before them, was Holol Haffol, the students remembered, dressed in his normal professor clothes and wearing a big, slightly confused smile. And he said, "Good afternoon, students. Sorry I spaced out there for a minute. Who's ready to have a good time learning today?" And then the students all exclaimed, "Good to have you back, Professor." And so things continued for a while as they were before Olaf arrived. But eventually, the students began to feel like their teacher was not telling them everything, and they began to worry that they were not being properly prepared for life after graduation. And so they decided to summon Olaf again. "Olaf!" they exclaimed, and the transformation took place again. And before them was Olaf once more, black clothes again reappearing on his body. "Oh, it's you," Olaf said to the students. "Yeah, we want to know about the dangerous side of chemistry," they said. "Professor Haffol doesn't ever talk about those parts. He only talks about the safe, wholesome parts, like baking soda and vinegar volcanoes," they told him. "Professor Haffol is a fool," replied Olaf. "But, as much as I hate to admit it, the truth is that you'll need both of us to have a complete understanding of all the chemical reactions. So summon us both often and combine what we say into a new concoction of your own." The end. Believe it or not, this silly story tells us which notes to play on the piano. To show how, let's define what a step is in music. So there are two types of steps. The first type is called a half step, and that just means moving from one key to the very next key, either up or down. The next type is a whole step, and you might have guessed that a whole step is simply two half steps in either direction. So if I were to play this note here and move one key up, that would be a half step up, because we're moving up in pitch and up the keyboard to the right. And it's the same if I were to go down. If I take this note and go down a half step, there's just a half step in the other direction, moving down the keyboard or down in pitch. So a whole step is simply two half steps. So if I wanted to play a whole step from here, I would move to this note, D, and skip this black key here. So that's a whole step. And moving down would be this black key here. Two half steps down from C. Now let's take a closer look at the name of our jovial professor, Holol Haffol. it sort of sounds like whole, whole, half whole, right? So let's see what that pattern sounds like when we translate it to whole steps and half steps on the piano. So let's start on this note. Now, if you recall our tour of the piano, you'll remember that the black keys alternate between 2 and 3, groups of 2 and 3, right? So what we want to do is find the group of 2 keys right in the middle of the keyboard and move directly to the white key on the left. So here's the 2, and move to the left, right here. Now this is called middle C, because it's the C that's generally in the middle of the piano. All right, now let's translate that pattern to whole steps and half steps. So it's going to be whole step, half step, whole step. Okay? So that's whole, whole, half, whole, right? That's the first and last name of our professor, Holol Haffol. Whole, lol, half, whole. Okay? And you can see that that gives us a nice, pleasant sound. This is the first 5 notes of the C major scale. So to complete the scale, we want to go back up to C again, right? So we want to play all the notes in the scale until we get back to our root note, which is C, because that's the note we started on, right? So you can see that this note here also is C because it's also on the left of these 2 black keys, right? And anytime you see a group of 2 black keys, you'll always be able to tell that the key to the very left, the very next key on the left, is going to be C. That's true for the whole piano. Okay, so in order to finish the scale, where did we end up? We ended up on this note, right? Whole, whole, half, whole, right? And to finish the scale, we're just going to repeat the name. So whole, whole, half. And we'll stop there because we've reached our C. So that's a complete scale. A complete major scale starting on the starting note of C. And we can see how nice that sounds. We call that a major scale because of there are no minor intervals in it. And we're going to go into intervals a lot soon. So for now, just practice this scale, okay? You can do 2 hands if you want. Or you can just keep your left hand on the C the whole time. Right? Just try to get your ear sort of used to that sound. You can do it down too. So first let's go over how we label our fingers, okay? So your thumb is your first finger. Your pointer finger is your second. Your middle finger is your third. Ring finger is fourth. Pinky is fifth, right? Pretty basic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Just like you would count something. Okay, so I'm gonna play the first 3 notes with my thumb, pointer finger, middle finger, and then I'm gonna cross under with my thumb so that I have enough fingers to finish the scale. Does that make sense? So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, cross under with your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? You don't have to do that fingering. You can do any fingering that feels comfortable to you, but for me, that's what works. But as we know, this story also contains Holol Haffol's alter ego, Olaf O'Loll. And he's sort of the Hyde to his Jekyll, right? The mad chemist Olaf O'Loll. And just like Olaf dragging everyone's mood down, he's also going to take a few of our notes down by a half step to transform our major scale into a minor scale. And whereas the major scale was bright, very agreeable sounding, our minor scale is going to sound a little darker, okay? And this is going to be very useful for us when we want to convey emotion. So to find out which notes we want to lower, we're going to analyze Olaf's name the same way we did with Holol Haffol's name, okay? So Olaf O'Loll kind of sounds like whole, half, whole, right? So let's translate that pattern on the keyboard. Let's start on the same note, C, middle C, right? And we're going to go whole, half, whole, whole. So whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So those are our first 5 notes. So all we did was lower this third note here, right? So far. And we can already tell that that's really changing the feel of our sound, the feel of our scale, right? So how do we get the rest of the minor scale? Well, it's the same general principle. We're going to repeat his name, but this time Olaf's a little more particular about what you call him. And so he'll give you the first 5 notes just by saying his name. But if you want the rest, you got to call him what his friends call him, which is his nickname, Laugh. Okay? So it's going to be Olaf O'Loll, Laugh O'Loll. Okay? So it's going to be whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Okay? So we ended up lowering 3 notes in this minor transformation, right? We lowered the third, and then we lowered the 6 and the 7, right? Because if we were to play a major scale, like this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? To get back to the octave. So we lowered the third, we lowered the 6th and the 7th. And that gives us our minor scale. Okay? So the cool thing about this is that it doesn't matter what starting note you use. So you've actually learned how to find the major and minor scales for any starting note or any key on the piano. Okay? So just to give you an example, let me choose a different starting note. It'll be totally random. We'll just do this guy. Okay, so that's a B flat. Okay? Or an A sharp, right? We'll talk about those differences later, but for now we'll call it a B flat. And we're going to do the same thing. Let's do a major scale first this time, okay? So we're going to do we're going to do Holol Haffol. So whole, whole, half, whole. Whole, whole, half, whole, right? So there's our first 5 notes of our B flat major scale, okay? And then to finish the scale, say his name again. Whole, lol, half, and then we're back on B flat, right? So whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Okay, great. There's our B flat major scale. Now let's transform it into a minor scale, okay? And we can either say Olaf O'Loll's name like we did, or we can just lower the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th. Whatever's easier for you. I'm going to spell out his name. So we're going to go Olaf O'Loll, Laugh O'Loll. So Olaf O'Loll, Laugh O'Loll. Okay? And we have our spooky minor sounding scale. Right? Whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Okay, we'll do it with one more key just to drive it home. We'll do it with, we'll go down to this note, E, okay? So let's do the major first. It's going to be Holol Haffol, Holol half, whole, Holol half. Okay, and there's our whole scale. There's an E major scale. Okay. Great. Now let's turn it minor. Okay, we're going to lower the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th. Or we'll spell out Olaf's name. All right? Olaf, O'Loll, Laugh, O'Loll. Okay? And there's our minor scale, our E minor. All right. So you may have been thinking, oh man, I really love playing in C, because there are no sharps or flats, and it's very easy to just kind of noodle around, because any white key I play is going to sound consonant or harmonious in the key of C, right? But I'm thrilled to tell you that every major key has an equivalent minor key. And so if I want to play a minor song and also not use any sharps or flats, there is a minor key for that. And how do I know which one it is from C? So I love my major scale, and I want to play the same pattern that is no sharps or flats, but in a minor key. So how do I figure out what that is? Well, just like in the story, when they wanted to summon a minor sound, they wanted to summon Olaf, right? They just said his first name, and that's what we're going to do too. So we go down to go minor, we go up to go major. So we're going to start on C, and we're going to say Olaf, and that's going to be whole, half. So a whole step down and a half step down. 1.5 steps down is Olaf's first name, right? So from C, we land on A. And now look, I can still keep my brain locked into the key of C major and play a minor scale. And I know that A is the right scale to do that because it's the right distance from its what's called a relative major key. So if I want to go from a minor to a major, just like we talked about, we just summon Olaf again, but the other direction. So now we're going up. So a whole step and a half step. And there we go. We're back to our major key, and we can still use no sharps or flats and sound great.